This is Impact, examining issues of concern to our community. And here's your host, Ryan Elijah.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Impact from inside the State House. We're in the governor's office. And first of all, thank you, Governor Daniels, for taking time to speak with us. When the General Assembly reconvenes, it'll be a very different look. Not only is the Republican now controlled by Republican control, but also a supermajority in the Senate. How will that change the legislative session that you put out?
It means that some big changes that we've been for, and many Democrats, I should add, have been for, will at least get a fair hearing. We were able to get a lot done during the time when Speaker Bauer ruled the House, and I try to give credit for that at every occasion. We, for instance, biggest tax cut in state history, capping property taxes in the bargain. But there are other things, such as reform and improvement in Indiana education, on which the door was simply slammed shut to any new idea. And now, no guarantees of passage, but at least we know that ideas about raising teacher quality, paying the best teachers more, freeing up local schools to be accountable for results, but to have some of the handcuffs taken off them so they can deliver those results, and offering more choices and options to our families to decide how their children should be educated. Ideas like this at least will get a chance now.
You talked about education reform in 2011, how big that was, and taking some of those shackles off a little bit. And there are some that will argue, teachers that will say, yes, we want to be graded by our students, but they'll say when they come in from a bad family situation, they've got such high standards. How do you balance that where you don't penalize a teacher for having students that have really troubled home situations?
I agree 100%, and our bill will take that into account. I mean, first of all, what we want to know is, did the children grow? And we now have created tools for measuring wherever the child started. And you're exactly right. Teacher can't control, who comes in the door. Mm-hmm. But we can measure, certainly in the elementary grade, where a child started and how much progress they made. And we should really be rewarding the teachers who consistently lead children to a year or more than a year of progress. The other thing is that student achievement right now doesn't count at all, and that's not right. But it can only be one factor in a complex of criteria that decides which teachers ought to get their job protected, which teachers ought to get the best pay increases. Right now it's just a matter of seniority, and that's not fair to young teachers or the best teachers in many cases.
We've seen in Fort Wayne a number of schools are on that list. They've failed year after year. When they hit that 6th year, you're talking about taking control away at that point. Can you kind of speak specifically to a high school that continues to go that way? What's your plan at that point?
Well, we need to decide that in this General Assembly. In 1999, Ryan, the Indiana General Assembly voted for a process that gave schools, as it turned out, 12 years to get adequate performance. And we are now reaching the end of 12 years, and we've got 20 or more schools in the state that have failed year after year after year. So the law already says that the state must intervene. You just don't let this go on forever. And we're going to ask the General Assembly to help us decide how best to do that. What's the fairest way? What's the way to get the quickest improvement for the kids? But think about it. The children who were 5 or 6 years old entering 1st grade when that law was passed are graduating, if they made it, as a third of our kids don't. And we haven't addressed the problem, and that's so sad.
You're a big proponent of school choice, letting them go to a different, if they're in a poor area, they shouldn't have to go to that school.
What I'm in favor of is trying to maximize the options available to parents and families, and trusting them and respecting them enough. We don't tell you what grocery store to go to. We don't tell you where to go. Get your car serviced. But we have said that unless you've got the money to pay for a private school, or unless you got the money to move closer to a public school that you like, you're stuck. And I just don't think that's right. So we're going to ask the legislature to help us open more charter schools, which are public schools, but the ones that choose to operate without some of the rules and restrictions. And I do think we need some vehicle that equalizes the opportunity across income, so that having looked at all the choices from homeschooling to standard public to charter public. If a family believes that that school down the block that is a non-government school is best for their child, they ought to have a chance to act on that.
Obviously, you're big on fiscal discipline. We've seen 2 high school close in our area. Big schools, big gyms. Is it frustrating to see those buildings that were once built for one purpose now really being a different purpose where they're not quite utilized as the money went years ago?
Well, sure. It's sad when it happens, and there's anybody that can understand the sense of tradition and sentiment that goes with this. But when the children aren't there anymore, it's not doing anybody a favor, the children, the taxpayers, or anybody else, to keep buildings going year after year when that money could be, the extra money could be used to pay teachers better or hire more. So a lot of school leadership around Indiana has had to make very difficult choices as the student population has shrunk or moved elsewhere. But that's why people sought those jobs, I presume, is to make the right choices even when they're tough.
Final education question, we'll go on to some other topics. When you look at telling the schools this year that they were not going to have those budget cuts, how important was that? And when you looked at this last year and the budget going forward, how important was that?
Very important. Money won't solve our problems. We've proven that. We've poured lots more money into education without much to show for it. But more beats less, and we raised education spending every year until the recession hit. Education spending, K-12 by the way, has never been as high a percentage of the state budget. It's 55 cents of every dollar now. More than half the entire state budget goes to K-12 education. That shows where our hearts are. But having cut state government in many places by 25 and 30%, higher ed accepted a 6% reduction. Finally, we had to look at that 55 cents on the dollar for some help, and we had the one reduction amounted to about 2% of those school budgets. And I'm very glad that that's all we had to do, and we're able to maintain spending for next year.
The elections, people spoke with such tenacity on different things, and the one thing they talked about was education reform. Jobs is another 9.9%, still a little bit higher than the average, but better than surrounding states. When you look at the job situation, obviously Indiana's thought to be pro-growth. How do you look forward to 2011?
If I knew that the national economy was going to begin to grow at even a moderate rate, I'd be very happy, and I'd be very optimistic. First of all, we've been leading America. We've been first, second, or third every month in the share of private sector job growth in Indiana. It hasn't been nearly enough because the national economy is growing so slowly. But we are poised to get more than our share as soon as it does. And we have improved our position in terms of the competition. We are seen now alone in really the northern whole half of the country as a great place to do business. So when anybody's ready to do business these days, Indiana is likely to get a good shot at it. So we're going to continue doing all we know how. Not raising taxes while everybody else did has made us a more attractive state for business. There just isn't enough business happening, but maybe next year we'll bring better times everywhere.
And when you talk about the unemployment rate, obviously unemployment insurance is a big issue that you'll deal with over the next few months. The premiums will go up. You want to cut the benefits in some ways, and obviously, in fact, Speaker Bauer, Minority Speaker Bauer, said it will be disastrous if that were to happen.
Well, it won't be disastrous. We have some of the highest benefits in America. The whole issue is, you have an insurance. This is an insurance system. We've had the 31st highest premiums, so relatively low. We've had the 3rd, 4th, 5th, depending on the year, highest benefits. Now, you can't have it both ways. If you want the 3rd or 4th or 5th highest benefits, you're going to have the 3rd or 4th or 5th highest premiums, and that, I think, would be a big mistake because it would drive jobs out of our state. Make it more expensive to hire people. Fewer people are going to get hired. So we have to bring those in line, and there's going to have to be some give from both sides. The premiums will have to go up some, and I've told the business community that. The highest benefits in America are going to have to come down closer to the national average somewhere. But we can do this while keeping the maximum benefit right where it is. There's some unfairnesses in the system that we can go after that won't really change the benefits for people who really deserve them. And the changes will be pretty moderate, but we do have to do it, and we will.
It's so hard with some of these unemployment numbers and the unemployment benefits that are paid out that the state has to keep up. Obviously, you talked about a broken system before. Things with IBM didn't work as well. Are you hopeful? I know caseworkers is one complaint we get a lot. I believe it's 19% you've increased caseworkers.
You mean, well, if you're talking about child protection, we doubled the number of caseworkers, and we've maintained that so that our the caseloads on them are down lower. If you're talking about the welfare system, you know, we're continuing to work on this. I'll just tell you that the new hybrid system, where we took the best of the new and the best of the old and put them together, is now operating in a significant percentage of the state with very, very good results. Much better than the system that we have been trying to fix, which was one of the worst in America. So that job's a work in progress, but it's coming along. And you know, we're doing pretty well now in terms of getting a timely answer and an accurate answer to people.
This is one of the big debates, and they've seen it on Capitol Hill, obviously. You want to, well, some in the party want to actually have the benefits. Others want to cut them off, saying we can't continue to pay this. Yeah. The elections was so big about the debt. Yes, we want to do this, but how do we pay for it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that, again, looks like unemployment insurance will be extended. You know, we're paying out longer by far than any time in American history, but this has been a very serious downturn, and so I think that's appropriate. But back to the levels again, I've run into a lot of businesses, and I'll tell you, a lot of them are in Northeast Indiana, who said, I'm trying to hire people, but they're telling me UI's a better deal, I'll stay home. And that's not good. That's not what the system intended. And so, again, we'll fix an out-of-balance unemployment insurance system in the state by a little give from the employers, a little give in terms of what have been very generous benefits.
Revenue has been such a problem for cities and towns, and do you forecast going forward that things might improve on that front, that some of that revenue stream might return to the state?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we've been seeing the last few months a strengthening in state revenues. This has got to get reflected eventually at the local level. And but again, it's just it's way too slow. It's just exactly a reflection of the national economy. Yes, it's growing, but far too slowly to get us back where we were in an acceptable time frame. So while that's the case, we're all going to have to practice some economies. I want to say that and, you know, nobody wants a recession like the one we've been in, but it does have the side benefit sometimes that people begin sharpening their pencil and doing the things they probably should have done before. And so we've seen this, and a lot of cities have taken some action. They've handled this pretty darn well, and I want to say mayors of both parties have generally done a really good job. And a lot of schools that I've looked at doing a really good job, starting to undertake some of the steps that will spend their dollars better, and soon there'll be more dollars.
You've been aggressive in pursuing Asian trips. You've been to China and have brought jobs back to Indiana. Do you still see that as a real key to continuing to breathe life into a really growing economy there, back over here?
Yeah, we send a lot of dollars over there. I want to go get them and bring them back here, literally, yeah. and put Hoosiers to work with them. Insourcing jobs is an important part of our strategy. We are #1 in America in investment in from Japan, and I want us to be #1 in general. We're close to that now, this is a huge. I always see this as one of the great wins for Indiana, when money we sent out into the world, when we bought some kind of foreign good, can be captured and brought back here, as opposed to all the other choices that the people holding those funds have, and put some of our folks to work. We think, Ryan, that this most recent trip, particularly the China leg of it, we've never had a trip where we had so many live options. We've got people scouting specific locations in Indiana. They almost beat us here, some of them. So as long as we can turn those travels, which are not a lot of fun, to tell you the truth, into jobs for our citizens, we'll keep making trips.
I remember sitting in this office when you first were elected talking about, I'm not here to be popular. Your approval numbers are high, but yet you're always going to have critics to some degree. Yeah. When you look at that, maybe what's the most unfair criticism of the Daniels administration?
Oh, I suppose any citizens are entitled to come to any judgment they want, and so I try not to think about in terms of fairness and unfairness. A farmer I know, a woman actually told me some time ago. She said, Mitch, don't worry too much about all this carping. Said, dogs don't bark at parked cars. And I've taken consolation for that. The way to avoid criticism, don't do anything. Just sit still, no one will be upset. Now, that was never our way. We thought this state was slipping and was being passed by and was not addressing its opportunities or its problems. And so we've been attacking them every day we've been here and trying to produce new approaches. Inevitably, this will unsettle some people, and change always does. But we just try to keep a sunny disposition about it and accept that if you're bringing change and bringing new ideas, people are going to question it, and some people are going to be unhappy.
It's change that's obviously grown to the national level, and a couple times this week alone, you've been somewhere and the topic of president came up, and you came out and said in November everybody needs to put this off until the General Assembly's done in April. But when you look at the Iowa caucuses in February, is it realistic for you to deflect that long, or how will you approach that in the new year?
It may not be. If it's too late, it is. But I got a job, I got a duty, and I'm very excited, as we've been discussing, about our chances to, including things we haven't talked about. I mean, we're going to pass a budget that keeps Indiana as a unique state that is handling its business, paying its bills, and protecting its taxpayers against an increase. We're going to try to make some more progress in reforming local government, bring some of this closer to the 21st century. And so that's simply going to have my full attention. If these questions are still of interest to people, a few months from now, we'll give it a little thought. But as you say, it may be too late, and if it is, we're still productively employed right here.
Somebody in our newsroom was saying, why would anyone want to run for president at this day?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. And, some people write that you have to be obsessed to put yourself through that, and I'm not. I never expected to hold elected office or run for office in the first place. Life led to that point. I did. I'm awfully glad, but I've never sat around I've never spent a minute sitting around thinking about running for anything else.
How much pressure is on the Republican Party? Obviously, there's been a wave at the national level, but people, to some degree, want change as much as they want a new party. And then now at the state level, you've got obviously the highest office and now both houses. Mm-hmm. What pressure comes with that?
I hope the positive pressure. Don't just sit there. Tackle these problems. Let's keep moving forward. That's how I choose to interpret election wins, as we discussed. That they're an instruction. They're not a pat on the back. They're an assignment to go try to do the people's business better than it was done before. So yes, I hope that my colleagues do feel pressure to not chicken out on things that we ought to do, and to be aggressive on behalf of the public interest. And I think they will.
There's been a change so much in Northeast Indiana with, obviously Marlon Stutzman moving on, state senator. Randy Bohr, who'd been here a long time, is gone. How will that change for Northeast Indiana? Obviously, David Long still holds a very high position with new members and some without that background that some of the other ones have.
Well, that's true. There've been some turnover, but there's a lot of good to that. New ideas and fresh blood. I'm really excited about all the freshmen coming in. I mean, I helped recruit a lot of them. We have more women. We on our side, we're able to elect 7 or 8 new women.
That's right.
And a lot of small business people who bring the kind of skills that you want in a genuine citizen legislature. And so, Sue Glick's going to be a new state senator from up there.
One of 2 caucus winners from our area.
Yes.
Kathy Hewer being the other.
Yes, and so you give up something when experience leaves, but you also gain something when new blood and people who can look at our issues with new perspectives show up.
I want to talk about the jobs number a little bit, the 9.9%. When you look at that, obviously coming from the budget office in Washington, How hopeful are you that that will come down soon when it's so important to different communities?
Obviously, it's one of the most important things. It is the most important thing we do. I will tell you that the unemployment number is very, I'm not sure how indicative it is. We've had a lot of months where we added more jobs where we had more people working, and then the unemployment rate, as reported, went up. And it's because people got less discouraged, and so more people came into the workforce, which is a good thing. But I tend to keep my eye on how many Hoosiers are working, and that has been creeping up, but I am hopeful, for the reasons we discussed, that it'll start to move more rapidly. Another thing we watch closely, by the way, is number of hours worked. And that's gone up fairly significantly. So people are getting overtime again in some cases, or working a full week when they were being asked to sit home a day or something before.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching Impact. And welcome back to the governor's office, again with Governor Mitch Daniels, and you're in the middle of your second term now. You have a lot of time left on that. What different field do you go in now with, obviously, you're not going to run for re-election in this office. You don't, the approval rating is important, but it's a little different than your first 4 years.
Ryan, I know the moment will come when it starts to feel different, but it hasn't come yet. Yeah. I'm still charged up, and I think if you were to take a survey around this building, they'd say nothing's changed. He's still bugging us with all these different ideas. He's still preparing bills that he wants us to consider, still making changes in the agencies of state government. I'm going to do my very, very best to maintain my energy in this job and my level of action right to the very end. We'll never run out of ways to stretch tax dollars or perform a service a little better, and I hope we don't run out of good ideas for changes in the laws of this state. So I know that we're almost 3/4 of the way through, but I still feel like the first day.
One feeling you have is about townships, and we've seen some townships lose some of that control. Do you think you'll make progress with that, and where would you like to head during this term?
Well, I hope so. I think that my predecessor, Joe Kernan, and Randy Shepard, we had some Northeast Indiana leadership, strong leadership on the commission that made these proposals. I think they had it about right. You know, township government served Indiana well for a long, long time, and great people are still serving in it. But I don't think it's a layer that we need. I think the duties that remain there could easily be and best be handled at the county level. So I'll be arguing for the Kernan-Shepard recommendation that we transition out of that. But others will disagree, and we'll see. Maybe there's some middle ground approach that we can take. But I do think it's important that we maintain some momentum and in modernizing our local government structure. It is very antique. You know, most states don't have anything called a township. Out here on the frontier, we divided into townships literally because that's how far a horse could travel to and from in a day. So a few things have changed since then, and I think we ought to make some changes with them. I'll give you a couple things I really hope we can get done. We allow really overt conflicts of interest in local government, in which people who are on a public payroll already get a second dip and get on a city council or some other board and vote on their own salaries. Yeah. You know, that's just, you got to pick one or the other. That's just not right. We have an awful lot of nepotism going on. 24%, somebody calculated, of all the employees of township government share a last name with the person who hired them. Well, these things probably, not condemning them or anybody, but I'm just saying we probably ought to leave that stuff behind as we head into the future. We do an In Your Corner segment. It's a consumer-based segment. I can't tell you how many people call and they're struggling. They can't pay their bills. Right. They can't keep their job. And obviously you've got all situations on education levels. Is it getting to the point, whether it's the state level or the federal level, where the government at some point can't keep up with that if the level of poverty continues to grow in some of these communities? The way I'd put it is that the rest of the taxpayers won't be able to keep up with it at some point. The government doesn't have any money. It has to take it away from you. Or the federal government can go borrow it from the Chinese, but even that will run out at some point. Stop. In the state, we don't do that. And so the question is, you're always looking for a balance. Every Hoosier I know has a real heart and wants to help people. who are down on their luck, out of work, or struggling somehow. But when it gets to the point where the help leads somebody to turn down a job because the free check is more attractive to them, you probably went a little too far. When it gets to the point where you're really penalizing or holding down the job sector that we need to provide opportunity for people because you're taxing it so much, you've probably gone a little too far. So I think we have it in about the right place now. But yeah, you can't just go on without end. And in the end, I don't think you do the recipient a favor if you make them permanent dependents on government, which is to say on their neighbors.
Behind us is the Blade. You know, your nickname when you're in the office of the budget director in the White House as well. When you look at what's happening on the national level, and certainly through all the elections, of the concern of spending, are you as concerned as all the voices out there? And have we taken some steps, or there's still major steps that have to be taken? I'm
probably more concerned than most. You just look at the arithmetic of this. I mean, the mathematics of our debt situation nationally. I'm proud to say not here in Indiana. Some states are going to hit the wall before the U.S. does. But
California's done so recently.
That's right. But here in Indiana, we've paid down our debt by 40% in the last few years. Our credit rating's AAA. So I'm talking about the national setting, and we cannot go on this track. People can differ honestly about how big or small government should be. So you can be a very passionate believer in bigger government or smaller government. Doesn't change the arithmetic. We are all in this together, and yes, we're going to have to do some bold things as a country. On the flip side, if we do them, I think America's future is incredibly bright. But this problem is not going to solve itself. In fact, if we don't act, we're going over Niagara, and none of us will like the outcome.
What does it say about Indiana, just about a minute left, when your name's thrown out there, Mike Pence's name's thrown out there as presidential possibilities, certainly in that top 10 that they focus on?
I always say it means the pickings are too slim, when they get down to the likes of me. Well, here's how I interpret it, Ryan. It cannot be anything personal. Most of the folks talking about, a lot of them I haven't even met. I don't travel the country giving speeches, so people haven't kicked the tires personally. That my name has come up and come up and come up like this can only mean one thing: people are noticing Indiana. There's a place out there that seems to have its act together. We're broke and they're not. And we're washing debt and they're paying it down. They're taking care of uninsured people, and they're building roads at a record rate, and they're cutting property taxes to the lowest in America, and something must be going on. This is exactly what I've said so often we wanted to do. We wanted Indiana to be a special place, a place people look to for leadership, and people noticed, so maybe they'd bring the next job here and not somewhere else. So if these rumors and so forth mean anything to me, that's what it means, and just makes us want to go work harder and create the next reason for people to notice us.
Governor, we're out of time. Thanks so much for the time.
Okay, Ryan, great to see you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Impact here from the Governor's office.